Okay, we're going to do the derivative of cotangent this time. So if I want to find the derivative of cotangent of x, what was the first step that we did when we found the derivative of tangent? Yeah, we want to put it in terms of cosine over sine. Okay, so again, what rule are we going to use to find the derivative? The quotient rule. So u is equal to cosine x, v is equal to sine x, and you might want the rules that I gave you earlier where you have that, where you can find them. What is the derivative of cosine?
Negative sine.
Negative sine. Okay. And what is the derivative of sine? Cosine. Okay. So we're going to plug in to what rule? We are. Okay, so we got to get our notation back here. Okay, what goes first?
V.
V. So V times U prime. So we can go ahead and say sine times sine is sine squared. So negative sine squared x. And then we do the U times V prime, right?
Well, when you do sine times sine, does that cancel out?
No, because
It's like x times x.
yeah, V is positive and U prime is negative.
Oh, I know that. I didn't mean that. I meant like when you square.
It's like sine squared times sine squared. So it's not sine squared, sorry. It's sine times sine. So you're squaring it. It's just like variables. Okay, how about the cosine side? Do we add or subtract? Subtract, and we have cosine squared x. And then what do we put on the bottom? Okay, put the square between the sine and the x. If you put the square after the x, you're saying sine of x squared, which changes your value. Okay, now if sine squared x plus cosine squared x is 1, what is negative sine squared x minus cosine squared x? Negative 1. And what is the reciprocal of sine? Which one is it? Cosecant. So I've got a negative. So it's going to be cosecant squared x. So that's my next derivative. Okay. So how many more do we have left to do? 2. Which 2 do we need to do? We need to do secant and cosecant. Okay, you're going to start seeing a pattern. Hopefully. Okay. All right. So let's now find the derivative. This is about the limit of the amount of proofs that we're going to be doing in here. But these are very doable proofs. So let's do secant first. Okay, how can we rewrite secant with sine or cosine? It's 1 over cosine. Good. So we're going to write it. Still haven't taken the derivative, so we need to keep it. What rule shall we use? Quotient rule, again. Okay, so U is 1. V is cosine. What is U prime? 0. Derivative of a number is 0. And from our rule I gave you earlier, what is negative sine? And believe it or not, you're going to need this stuff next semester. But we'll do a little review before we do that. Okay, so back to our derivative. What goes first? Which is just
0.
0. Okay, so then we subtract. And so we're subtracting a negative, which makes this
Plus.
plus.
And it's sine.
And what do we divide by?
Over b squared, which is cosine squared a.
Okay. Here's where we get creative. We don't know what sine over cosine squared is, but what happens if we split cosine squared into two parts?
You get
So you get, no, you don't get 0 over it. Sine over cosine times 1 over cosine. So what is sine over cosine? And what is 1 over cosine? Secant. So you see how secant is in its own derivative? Yeah. It's in its own derivative. So you can do that. And actually, the way I prefer to write it to help me remember it is the ones that have itself in its own derivative, I rewrite it. Either way is correct, it doesn't matter. Okay? So either way, you can do that. Okay, how many more we got left to do? One. And then we're going to do some problems with it, assuming we have time for it. Okay. Okay, which one are we left with? We need to do cosecant. Okay, I want y'all to try it yourself. And we're going to say goodbye to our English people for the moment. Say goodbye.
Bye.